Welcome to our lesson on adjacent and vertical angles. I've got a definition here for you. It says adjacent angles. Two angles are adjacent if they share a common side, a common vertex, and do not overlap. So, in other words, I call them angle neighbors because they're right next to each other, but they're not actually overlapping. So, for example, if I were to draw two angles that were connected, they have one side in common. They also have one vertex in common, and they're not overlapping, they're just next to each other. So those right there are adjacent angles. Another way that you might see adjacent angles is if we're looking at something that kind of looks like the letter X. Some adjacent angles might be, for example, this angle right here. And then, for example, this angle right here. The purple angle and the blue angle are adjacent because they're right next to each other in this X diagram. Okay, vertical angles. Two angles are vertical if they are opposite angles formed by intersecting lines. This is important. Vertical angles have equal measures. That's very important to remember. In other words, they make a V or I say they're across the street from each other. Now, obviously, that's not math language, but just in general, that's kind of the way I think of it. So let me give you an example. Vertical angles are made kind of when two lines are crossing in like an X type of format. So vertical angles, for example, would be this one is vertical to kind of across or opposite of this angle right here. And you can kind of see that I made a V with the blue angle and a V with the yellow angle. So they kind of make Vs, or if you want to think of them as neighbors across the street, one's across the street from the other, that's a way to think of it as well. All right, so let's refer to the diagram below. There's two diagrams. We're going to identify each pair of angles as adjacent, vertical, or neither. So the first two angles I'm looking at are angle 1 and angle 2. Those are right next to each other. They don't overlap. They do share a side, and they also share a vertex. So I'm going to call them adjacent. All right, if we look at the second question, let me erase that for a minute so we can see this a little better. It's asking, what is the relationship between angle 1, which is right here, and angle 3, which is right here? Well, I see they're kind of across from each other. They're making those V's, so I'm going to call that vertical. Those are vertical angles. All right, I'll let you do the rest of those on your own, but for a moment, let's skip down to the next part. It says, find the measures of angles 1, 2, and 3 if the measure of angle 4 is 128 degrees. So what I know is that right here, this angle, angle 4, right here, is 128 degrees. Now, something important that I told you earlier is that if two angles are vertical, they're actually equal to each other. So now that's coming kind of back into play as some important information, because you can see that angle 4 and angle 2 are vertical, which means they are the same angle measure. So that means angle 2 is also 128 degrees. Now, the next thing that I want you to notice is the relationship between angle 2 and angle 3. You can see that they make a straight line. They are supplementary, which means they add up to 180 degrees. Well, if they add up to 180 and we have already taken up 128, then I want to know what's left over. So 180 minus 128, we borrow, and we're left with 52 degrees, which means that angle 3 is 52 degrees. So let's start to write this out. Measure of angle 1, we haven't talked about yet. Measure of angle 2, we decided that's 128 degrees because it was vertical to angle 4. Measure of angle 3, well, 2 and 3 are supplementary, so they add up to 180, so that has to be 52 degrees. Now, I'm going to erase this so that we can kind of take another look at it. Angle 1 is actually vertical to angle 3, which means that if angle 1 is 52 degrees, then angle 3 is 52 degrees, then angle 1 is also 52 degrees. All right, I am going to let you do the rest of this on your own, this one, this problem right here, as well as the rest of these, and we will go over that during class. Thank you.